Today on Coffee Break Tennis, there is so much to talk about. Like one thing, tennis is back. Tonight, 3 a.m., so Friday early morning on the East Coast here in the United States of America, Tennis Channel is going to be airing an exhibition tennis tournament in Germany. It's a social distancing tennis tournament. Not like that stupid thing they're doing in Madrid, the virtual reality video game tournament that, let's be honest, nobody wants to watch that. But real tennis being played by real players outside of the top 100, but still top tennis players will be playing. We have that to talk about. We have the merger between the ATP and the WTA to talk about. Will that happen? Is it even possible? Of course, we have Dominic Thiem saying he does not like Novak Djokovic's idea of the top 100 ATP players donating money to lower-ranked tennis players to help them get through this financially challenging time with the coronavirus. And then, of course, Nick Kyrgios comes in and challenges Dominic Thiem on that, saying he just doesn't get it. We have all of that, and we were going to talk about it yesterday, and then I discovered this.
I'm not good.
Yeah, look, not gonna lie, Elliot was quite a big thing when I was in high school.
He got it, young luck, no!
I'm not with you, man. I'm at the hangar.
Nah, he's hacking, bro.
You reckon?
I just got sniped, man. He's hacking for sure, bro.
Yesterday, and for some reason I've seen this nowhere, so it's kind of exclusive here to Coffee Break Tennis, Nick Kyrgios and Elliot Loney, that guy who does the really good Rafa impression. I'm sure you've seen him every Australian Open. He manages to get on TV in some capacity or another and do his excellent Rafa Nadal impersonation.
A quick Rafa, real quick.
Bro.
But it's tough for me. I'm trying to keep my forehand, very difficult. Obviously for me, I'm just watching
Someone just
everybody
jumped
play
off right
the very good for them. Very, very tough for me.
Boys, get down to me. Boys, get down to me.
I'm trying to figure it out.
They were playing Call of Duty Warzone, one of my all-time favorite video games, I might point out. Right here, I have gone through the entire, over an hour of Nick Kyrgios gameplay, and I have time-stamped all of the highlights, which I will share with you later on in today's show. But my number one favorite is this clip of Nick Kyrgios talking about other ATP tennis players.
Oh my god, dude. I just feel like everything a tennis player does on social media is just cringe. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what it is about them, bro.
I'll tell you what you should do. You should post your Warzone stats on Twitter, bro.
Like, everything a tennis player does on social media is, like, totally so cringe, mate. It's just so cringe. So, while preparing for today's show, I thought about what Nick Kyrgios said, and I thought I would take a look at other ATP tennis players, and we'll throw some WTA players in there for good measure. I looked at their Instagram stories to see if I could find anything that was, like, totally so cringe, mate. So here we've got Alina Svitolina, the opposite of cringe, dance master and fitness master, I might add. No problems there. Daria Kazatkina, not as good of a dancer as Alina Svitolina, but this is fun. Not cringe. I think it's funny. We have Grigor Dimitrov golfing. Totally normal there. Nothing wrong with that.
Money.
Andrei Rublev, a little cringe. Here is his boy band poster picture that he put up here, which of course reminds us of the time that he was in a Russian boy band. Sasha Zverev did the stupid Madrid virtual open that no one cares about in the tennis world. Yulia Gerges is teaching us how to be fit like a pro tennis player. I'm going to do these exercises myself, no problems there. And Tommy Haas showcasing his beautiful one-handed backhand, no problem with that. So not everyone's totally cringe like Nick Kyrgios said, mate, but he wasn't totally wrong because, of course, Novak Djokovic did a live on Instagram with a spiritual, magical guru friend of his, and we can find a little bit of cringe there.
And that is the hero's journey. That is the warrior's journey. And that all takes us to an ever-encompassing energy vortex of love. And
that's beautifully said, brother.
Yeah.
So
Cringe.
Of course, that's just my opinion. Comment below if you have no problem, if you don't think it's cringy at all, to talk about an all-encompassing vortex of love.
Drop it.
Today on Coffee Break Tennis, we've got a giant stack. I hope you can see the thickness of this stack of tennis news that we have here. Today, we're going to talk about, of course, the return of tennis on Tennis Channel tonight, and it's going to be live streamed for free pretty much all around the world. We will see Dustin Brown's exhibition. We'll talk a little bit about that. Of course, we'll talk about Nick Kyrgios opposing Dominic Thiem, who opposes Novak Djokovic's idea for helping out the lower-ranked tennis players. Roger Federer tweeted about merging the ATP and the WTA. Is it feasible? Is it a good idea? We will talk about that. Polling data shows most fans of sports are not ready to go back to live sporting events without a coronavirus COVID-19 vaccine. Is that a bad sign? Does that mean if that's like a year or more away, we won't have a U.S. Open, we won't have any tennis tournaments for a long time? Well, there is some good news on that end, so we will talk about the latest with the vaccine and how things look for live sports. Of course, we will go through some of the highlights from Nick Kyrgios playing Call of Duty with Elliot Loney, who actually wasn't playing. He was just on the stream chatting with them while they played. Nick Kyrgios and his totally baller friends who have extremely high KDs, I might point out. And finally, at the end of the show, we will talk a little bit about this exciting news story that Mr. Goat, the talking tennis cat, found. He's not here right now because he's working on this, a cat army tank that he requested come with real live tank shells that he can shoot at dogs and people who annoy him. All that and nothing more on today's edition of Coffee Break Tennis. So before we go into anything today, I want to talk a little bit about Djokovic and this guy, Shervin, this spiritual health guru, magic medicine man, whatever he is, because I don't want to totally rip on him, right? Like, I took a look at his Instagram account. Look at this guy. Like, clearly, he's doing something right. He's totally ripped, right? He's at the pinnacle of fitness. And during their live stream, Novak Djokovic, he shared this story about a very inspiring man who was born with no arms or legs. And of course, Djokovic talks a lot about his own personal experience, about achieving his dreams, about winning Grand Slams, being #1 tennis player in the world. And they do a lot of motivational talk. Nothing wrong with that. I took a deeper dive and looked at this Shervin guy, and this was him in the supermarket talking about some things that we see as healthy foods.
This right here looks really good, almond breeds. This is not good. Let me tell you why. Here we have calcium carbonate. If you've been on my channel for a while, you know what I've been telling you about calcium carbonate. It's not actual calcium. It's a man-made compound. It's a calcium atom mixed with 3 carbon atoms. What do you get with that? You get chalk.
Calcium carbonate? Yeah, doesn't sound good to me. He says it's basically chalk. I don't want to drink chalk. No problems there.
What happens in the human body when you put chalk in the body? You get disconnection throughout the entire body. You get acidosis. You get cells not able to communicate. You get toxin buildup. You get parasites.
Yeah. Who likes disconnection or acidosis, toxins in the body, a lack of cellular communication? I'm down with that, I think.
Why is tricalcium phosphate in here? Somebody tell me why. We don't want tricalcium phosphate in our body. We don't want any of that stuff. We don't want calcium carbonate. Look, I'm just going to have to put out an entire recipe, and there's millions of them online, on how to make your own almond milk, how to make your own nut milk, how to sprout it. That's the best part. That's radionics. That's creating your own energy and vibration and alchemy and then consuming it. That's what we want to do, people. Let's make our own.
Radionics and creating your own energy with vibrations in your body. Okay, they're starting to lose me there. Now it's sounding a little bit kooky. But like I said, these guys are giving an inspirational talk on Instagram Live. I don't want to tear apart at that. But we must point out this one thing I spot, and maybe this is where the anti-vaccine side of Novak Djokovic comes. Take a look at this.
My journey with this started when my son was...
Okay, stop the tape. We don't have to watch very much of that to know that he's talking to someone that's basically going to say that vaccines cause autism, which we know is a very hot topic with some people. And while, these guys are going, most people would say almond milk from the store is super healthy stuff. But, if they're going to go so far with their diets, and clearly Djokovic and this Shervin spiritual guru guy, they're super fit. So, I can't blame them for being very careful with what they put in their bodies. But I don't want to talk about vaccine stuff too much today at all. Let me just read one thing from John Wertheim's his Sports Illustrated mailbag blog where he warned about some of the dangers of telling people, like someone like Djokovic telling people that vaccines are dangerous. And here it is. Also, this has some stuff on Federer and the ATP-WTA merger. But let's skip right to this person who wrote to John Wertheimenberglers. He wrote this. Thank you. This is from Gene. As a child clinical psychology intern in 1968 at a major city hospital, I tested and interviewed a boy and his mom. He was ready for kindergarten age-wise, but had some developmental delay and severe hearing and vision problems, which were all a result of mom contracting German measles early in her pregnancy. Getting childhood diseases because you are not vaccinated is not always benign by a long shot and endangers the population of at-risk people like mothers-to-be, cancer patients, etc. Anti-vaxxers need not put such a mother, through this and damage her unborn son when it can be avoided. It is tantamount to assault. Of course, you can't give vaccines to pregnant women. So if you are not vaccinated, you're putting people like that in danger. Cancer patients can't have vaccines. So those who are the anti-vaxxers, they are more dangerous to potentially spread to these at-risk individuals. And John Wertheimlers said, it is disappointing Djokovic gave this credence. It is possible to be a seeker, which is admirable and open to alternative therapy psychology methods, while also respecting objective reality. The idea that during a global pandemic, as his sport contemplates a path to relaunching, a top player would make a comment like that, it's very problematic. Again, I don't want to impugn Djokovic. He is overall a force for good. He's a worthy number one. His willingness to challenge conventional wisdom is something to be admired, but he's way off base here, should run back, not walk back those regrettable remarks. So there you go on that. I thought that was actually a pretty good answer from John Wertheim, and we're going to move on. But I'll say, vaccines, I know some people love them and some people are totally against them. I like the polio vaccine, I got to say. At the same time, the flu shot, it's a thing that I've never had before. I've never wanted to get the flu shot before. So like I said in the last show, I understand both sides of this, but I think there's enough clear evidence that the anti-vaxxers are potentially a danger to the rest of society. So comment what you will about that. Let's move on real quick. Let's just go through some highlights of Nick Kyrgios on the game. Of course, get Elliot Loney in there, who this is probably my favorite, and this is a thing Kyrgios just loved. He kept saying it over and over again, and they kept asking Loney to keep doing his impersonation of Gary V. That's Gary Vaynerchuk. He's like, ironically, he's another motivational guru, not so much with the health and weird science stuff, but he's all about, working hard and striving to be your best. You can do anything if you set your mind to it. And this is a spot-on impersonation of Gary Vaynerchuk. Kyrgios had requested at this point, like, Loney, mate, give us one more Gary V, mate. Give us one more Gary V, except, this time, look, add a little more, mate. And Mr. Loney did not disappoint with this incredible impersonation of Gary V. Take a listen.
We just need a win, boys.
Go hard on the perspective.
Yeah, just like, do like a couple sentences and then just say it.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, dude, I'm looking forward to this so much. Like, I'm a little boy now.
The number one thing that I notice about you guys in this new generation is these guys just don't do enough. Okay, you guys got to work harder. You got to play more COD. You got to work as a team. Okay, when I was like 12 years old, I already had $300 million in the bank. Okay, I used to work for $12 an hour as a slave labor, and now I'm like one of the richest guys in the world. And you know what you got to do to get to my level? You got to change your perspective.
Glass half empty is a terrible way to live life. Both my parents were crackheads, and I lost my job, and I'm just trying to change people's perspective.
You gotta change your perspective.
Another thing that was incredible was Nick Kyrgios claiming that he is number one in all of the tennis tour at Call of Duty and FIFA as well. And he basically said that he makes a ton of money gambling on FIFA video game soccer games, playing against other guys on the ATP Tour. Take a listen.
I'm the number one tennis player in the world.
Literally, 100% I'm the best COD player, like, on the tour. I already said that, but, like...
Sure.
100%. Like, bro, I'll back myself in FIFA as well, bro. Like, dude, people on the tennis tour are my ATMs with FIFA. You know how much money I've won from them?
By the way, if you're on PlayStation playing Call of Duty and you want to be friends with Nick Kyrgios, just like Steph Tsitsipas, you can see this here. He on Kyrgios' birthday recently revealed Kyrgios' phone number, his cell phone number, and you can clearly see here Nick Kyrgios got so many calls and text messages that he had to change his number. He had to cancel that cell phone number, which is not an easy thing to do during the COVID-19 crisis. So let's have a little sympathy for Nick Kyrgios having to go through that headache. How long was he on hold with the cell phone company to get that straightened out, I wonder. But now I'm going to do my own little Steph Tsitsipas right here. This is Nick Kyrgios. Zoom in. This is Nick Kyrgios's. This is his name on Call of Duty. If you want to send him a friend request, it's Keegs is a ghost. Nick Kyrgios. Very good Call of Duty player, I might add. And this is also Nick Kyrgios in the news a little bit. Take a look at this. Nick Kyrgios, we had heard that he had offered to people to send him DM messages, private messages, if they needed help, if they were hungry and couldn't afford food during the COVID-19 pandemic. And take a look at this. Nick Kyrgios has actually been driving to people's houses with boxes of food and knocking on the door, leaving it at their doorstep, just like he promised. And I have to say, being a Call of Duty player myself for very many years, I have to say I observed Nick Kyrgios' style of play in Call of Duty. He's a very heroic kind of guy who's willing to put his own safety on the line to rescue his friends. Take a look at this incredible heroic move from Nick Kyrgios, reviving his friend who was about to bleed out in Call of Duty.
There's another one there.
I'm not sending the channel. Oh my god.
Where are you? I'm gonna come to you.
He's trying to thirst me, man.
Someone shoot him. Someone
Someone's got sick. I'm gonna bleed out. I'm gonna bleed out. Gooch.
They're running away. They're running away.
Nice.
That was one of the clutchest revs I've ever done in my career.
I'm not playing dumb because Keys just saved my fucking life. I'm not playing dumb.
Nick Kyrgios' friend pointing out that a good way to motivate Nick Kyrgios to get angry and play really good on Call of Duty is to say that Uncle Tony thinks he's better at Call of Duty than Nick Kyrgios.
Tell Nick Uncle Tony thinks he's better than him at Warzone. Oh.
And finally, one of the players in the game stream said, Nick, what are you doing during the crisis right now, now that you can't play tennis? What are you doing with your time, Nick?
So what are you doing in the off season, Nick?
He puts his legs in a 90
put
degree.
my legs in 90 degrees and just do absolutely nothing. I just really sink down in my chair, make sure I'm really doing nothing.
Mate, I'll just recline 90 degrees in my chair, make sure I sink really deep into the chair, mate, and I do absolutely nothing. All right, let's move on to some real tennis news. I'm sorry if you didn't find that entertaining. I thought it was too awesome to not do anything else but that to start today's show. So let's go to Nick Kyrgios criticizes, it's more Nick Kyrgios news, criticizes Dominic Thiem's opposition to helping struggling players. If you missed it, Novak Djokovic came up with a scheme for top 100 players to donate money. We talked about this a week or two ago, and I was basically saying some of those players who are at the lower end of the top 100 might not be able to part with thousands of dollars. That might be, it's one thing to be 100 in the world and making pretty good money, and then compare that to being one of the big three and making a lot more money. So I understand that side. And Dominic Thiem is feeling the same way, even though he's closer to that big three money. I'm sure he's not too close to it, but he's definitely closer than some barely in the top 100 guys. So Dominic Thiem, if you missed it, he said, I've seen players on the ITF tour who don't commit to the sport 100%. Many of them are quite unprofessional. I don't see why I should give my money. I'd rather donate to people in institutions who really need it. There is no profession in the world where you're guaranteed success and high income at the start of your career. None of the top players took anything for granted. We all had to fight our way up to the rankings. Why should I give any of my money to them? Fair point. I think we could all say it's really not Dominic Thiem's responsibility to fix a problem that the sport, right? The sport, the league, the ATP should find a way to make sure players who are at the lower end of the ranking spectrum should be able to make enough money to keep doing it at least. I mean, it is in the interest of the survival of their sport. Of course, you need guys like the big three, you need guys like Dominic Thiem to sell tickets, and you also need guys like someone ranked 200 in the world for them to totally destroy in the first round of a major, right? We need all the players. The chessboard, you need the king, the queen, the bishop, the rook, and you need the pawns too. Of course, Nick Kyrgios chimed in with this. Bro, he totally doesn't understand the point. Like, we at the top get paid far too much and there's not enough to go around, mate. It's about helping people where we can, professional, unprofessional. Put yourself in their shoes, mate, right? So, of course, I'll ask you to comment below what you think about this, but I got to say, yeah, it's kind of like the thing with the vaccinations and Novak Djokovic. You see both of their points. It's not Dominic Thiem's responsibility to fix this problem. The league, the ATP, the sport itself, they got to fix this kind of thing. And at the same time, I can see from Nick Kyrgios' side, like, look, Dominic, it's not going to cost you that much. Maybe we could pony up right now because we know a lot of people in our own sport are hurting. Let's protect our own. But, I'm not too worried about it because I think these guys are going to get some help. We've already seen that the tennis league is, after hearing what Djokovic is saying, they kind of got them to move on this issue. So something's going to happen. But the best thing that we can do for these players and for all the players on the tennis tour is to get tennis back. And we will talk about how that can happen in a second. But first, let's take a look at tennisworldusa.org. Boris Becker says the U.S. Open must find a way to go ahead. The biggest question in tennis right now is, will there be a U.S. Open? It's coming up fairly soon. And with the coronavirus stuff, we don't know if it will actually happen. Most tennis players outside of the top 50, says Boris Becker, male or female, need that weekly paycheck. For 30 years, the ATP, WTA, and the ITF have never agreed with each other and only worry about their own tournaments. But now everybody is in the same boat and struggling. It is an opportunity of a lifetime to bring everyone together. Tennis is one of the few sports that can be held without spectators. It's not ideal, but most tennis players need to make a living. If everything is canceled for the next few months, half of the players will have to look for other jobs, which we already know. There's one player, a doubles player who's a slam champion, and I saw that he's working at Lidl, which is an excellent German grocery store that I actually have one here in Georgia that I like to go to and get things like this. Gerolsteiner German sparkling mineral water, which actually they don't sell at Lidl. I get it somewhere else. So we go to Germany, where Dustin Brown is putting on an exhibition tournament that you will be able to watch tonight, 3 a.m. on Tennis Channel. I've already hit the record button on my cable box, so I will be watching that tomorrow. And sure, these guys are outside of the top 100. The highest ranking player is Yannick Hanfmann. He's 28 years old, and he is 143. He is the highest player. It looks like they're going to do kind of like a round robin, like what we see with the ATP Finals, the WTF World Tour Finals, as it used to be called. And Hanfmann said, it's pretty cool. I'm curious to see how many people will be watching this. And honestly, for guys who are ranked outside of the top 100, it's probably going to be a pretty big audience. Maybe the biggest audience a tournament like this will ever have in all of history. However, I miss the tingling, the competition, even if only a few €100 of prize money will be at stake. So they're playing for very little money. Nothing new for guys ranked outside of the top 100. Hanfmann will have free room and board lodgings at the academy. And he also mentioned that he is just about managing to make ends meet, having earned just a little over $500,000 in his entire career. Think about how much he spends to travel the world to play on the tennis tour. He said, I've built up a few savings, and I'm not one to throw money away, but things are getting tight right now. Of course, they asked him, well, what do you think about, Dominic Thiem and Kyrgios are saying about top 100 players giving money to them? And surprisingly, he doesn't like the idea for the very same reason that I was talking about. Take a listen to this. Why should players below the top 10 be responsible for making others feel better? And yeah, in the top 10, big three guys, I think no problem. Maybe you should. I'm not going to require them to do it, but they should throw some money to these guys who are really hurting right now. And I think it's pretty interesting to hear that. So make sure you check that out. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to watch it. It's being held it's an 8-man tournament at the Base Tennis Academy in the tiny town, little kleinen town of Hohe Grünshausen near Koblenz. And it's being put on, of course, by Germany's Dustin Brown. I don't know where you can watch it if you don't have Tennis Channel, but I'm sure if you Google it, you can figure it out. I will be watching on the Tennis Channel. So what about real tennis, right? Not these exhibition type things, which is obviously a great start in the right direction if you want to see tennis on TV again. When will real tennis tournaments like the U.S. Open happen? Well, we'll do the WTA ATP merger stuff in just a little, and then I also have some cool stuff here about Ivan Lubicic, former world number 3 and coach of Roger Federer, as well as Marin Cilic, talking a little bit about how they think Roger Federer will come out from this long break. Spoiler alert there. They're pretty optimistic, like I am myself. Of course, I mean, how could you not be after seeing what Federer did after half a year of no tennis and a major knee surgery, or fairly major for Federer at least, and then he comes and wins the Australian Open and Wimbledon as his response to that? I mean, how could you doubt the guy? We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the merging of the tennis tours. But first, let's take a look at the latest on coronavirus and how we could possibly get tennis back on. So first, this is from a few days ago. We get this Reuters, UK Reuters.com article here. It's a Reuters Ipsos poll. They do all kinds of polling on stuff throughout the year, but now they're doing, of course, COVID-19 related polling. Most Americans to avoid sports, other live events before coronavirus vaccine. Reuters Ipsos poll. Only about 4 in 10 who follow sports avidly and go to sporting events, amusement parks, arts, and entertainment venues said they would go again if they reopened before a vaccine was available, the poll found. Okay, so that means if you're selling tickets to the U.S. Open or the French Open in September, October, whenever it is, this is bad news because less than half of your fan base, the kind of people you can rely on to bring business in, to buy tickets and attend your live sporting event, less than half of them say they will go without a vaccine. And of course, we all know that there could never be a vaccine possibly, although I was thinking, and we have some stories in the stack that I'm about to get to, but after we did our last show where I said, look, there possibly could never be a vaccine, we've had plenty of things in the past that no one ever found a vaccine for, but I don't think ever before have we had like the entire world trying to find a vaccine. There's more resources being allotted for this than for anything in history, really, right? We haven't seen anything like this since the Spanish flu 100 years ago, over 100 years ago. So I was thinking about that, and of course, my instinct was correct because we have some stories backing that very thing up. So let's get in right to it. First off, remdesivir. You've probably heard about this in the news recently. This is big news. They just succeeded in a crucial study. This is from BusinessInsider.com, raising hopes for a first COVID-19 drug. Now, this is significant because it reduces the time people have to be hospitalized with COVID-19. Now, it's only about 31% faster will people recover from COVID-19 when they take remdesivir. That sounds like a tiny number, but when we're talking about flattening the curve, which was essential to make sure we don't overwhelm the medical institutions, we don't overwhelm hospitals, one way to help not overwhelm hospitals, let's say things go back to normal and then there's the second wave that I'm sure you've heard about and a big spike in cases in COVID-19, and then people are going to the hospital. Well, if it takes 31% less time to treat someone from the time they go in with COVID-19 to the time they can safely leave the hospital, freeing up a hospital bed for someone else, freeing up doctors and nurses' time for other people to come in with COVID-19 and get treated, that goes a very long way. So 31% reduction, big time good news right there. It's not guaranteed yet, but there's lots of great signs, and they are greenlighting this in the U.S. right now. Dr. Anthony Fauci has been talking about that quite a bit. But let's talk about the vaccine, because some people might say you can have a U.S. Open with no fans, which they've talked about reducing prize money for the players if they were to do that. And I totally support if they do that. I want to see tennis on TV, and I want the players to go back to playing their sport. I want, guys like the big three to not have the window close on their best years when they can still go out there and compete at the highest levels. And if we're absolutely relying on a coronavirus vaccine to get things back to normal, say by the Australian Open next year, right there we got the Australian Open, we're going to need a vaccine possibly. We've heard before in some news that Australia wouldn't want to put on a big event like the Australian Open without a vaccine. And here is some good news this is from the NewYorkTimes.com. The race for the coronavirus vaccine in Oxford group leaps ahead. In the worldwide race for a vaccine to stop the coronavirus, the laboratory sprinting fastest is at Oxford University in the UK. Oxford scientists now say that with an emergency approval from regulators, the first few million doses of their vaccine could be available by, wait for it, September. In time for U.S. Open, French Open. Maybe you push them back. By the way, there is news in here. I probably won't get to it. I'll just tell you about it right now. The French Open is already considering, Roland Garros, they're considering pushing it back another week to give players more time to recover from the U.S. Open. Let's say the U.S. Open gets word that a vaccine is coming out, and they push it back a couple of weeks to allow this vaccine. We can have the full-on U.S. Open with fans there, maybe. This is very optimistic, and none of this stuff is guaranteed, but these are great signs. So a couple more things from this article, then I'll move on to another good news article on this front, on the vaccine front. Unless, of course, you're Novak Djokovic and you don't want a vaccine, maybe. Just kidding. Well, Maybe that's true. I don't know. The Oxford scientists now say that with emergency. Okay, so we said that. Now they have received promising news over at Oxford. Those geniuses, those scientists, they've received promising news suggesting that it just might work. It just might work. Scientists at the National Institute of Health's Rocky Mountain Laboratory in Montana last month inoculated 6 rhesus macaque monkeys with single doses of the Oxford vaccine. These animals were then exposed to heavy quantities of the coronavirus and that's causing the pandemic, an exposure that had consistently sickened other monkeys in the lab. But more than 28 days later, all 6 of these monkeys were totally healthy. They go on to say that these monkeys are pretty much, quote, the closest thing we have to humans, from Dr. Eddie Munster. What a name. Okay, I don't know if it's Eddie, but Dr. Munster said, noting that scientists were still analyzing these results. He said he expected to share it with other scientists next week, then submit it to a peer-reviewed journal. This story is from a few days ago. Again, very good news. I can't even crumple this up and volley it away. It's such good news. Here's more good news. This is from The Independent, UK. Coronavirus vaccine. Trump's Operation Warp Speed aims to make 300 million doses by January. So, hey, let's say the Oxford guys, they fail. Well, we're aiming to have it by January in time for our favorite tournament outside of Wimbledon here at Coffee Break Tennis, the Australian Open. In an unprecedented move, Donald Trump is attempting to fast-track the development and production of a vaccine for the coronavirus that would give the U.S. the ability to inoculate 300 million people by January 2021. The administration is calling the Manhattan Project-style vaccination program Operation Warp Speed. Maybe Space Force will be involved. Bloomberg News has reported and is hoping to cut the time before rolling out an effective vaccine to the masses by as many as 8 months. Basically, to not read this whole thing to you, and we keep this, say what you will about Trump's ideas, but maybe the thing with the Clorox bleach, not such a good idea. This one sounds like a pretty good idea. I read through the article for you, so you don't have to do it. You don't have to listen to me read the whole thing. And basically what they're going to do is strip away all the red tape, put a ton of tax dollars to work at this, and they're basically, the reason why they're going to be able to speed up the process for developing a vaccine, and not to mention, like I said before, they're basically getting everyone involved on this. Typically, you'll see, these scientists, researchers, epidemiologists, whatever they are, whoever's developing the vaccines, I don't know. They split up and they work on different vaccines. Well, right now, we're very concentrated in the effort to find a vaccine for COVID-19. And basically what the Operation Warp Speed and the Trump administration are trying to do here is strip away the red tape, give unlimited money to this so that they can mass produce millions of vaccines that might not even work, right? They're going to make some batches that probably won't work, that are probably failed, and it's okay. They don't have to worry about losing the money. It's not like they're operating like a normal business because the government's going to back them on every failure along the way. So by trial and error, every time they make an error, they can try another one until eventually they get the vaccine, and they're pretty confident they can have it by January in time for the Australian Open. So I told you today, lots of good news all over the place, including we got some tennis on tonight at 3 a.m. with Dustin Brown, one of the most entertaining players out there to watch. All right, real quick, we'll do this, and then we'll get out of here. We've gone very long today. Oh, my God. All right, and finally, let's talk about the WTA ATP merger thing that a lot of people are wondering about. Roger Federer tweeted about this. Wawrinka, Rafa, Nadal appear to support it. I haven't seen anything about what Djokovic thinks about it, but I would guess that he doesn't support it. And, of course, Nick Kyrgios, always keeping us on our toes. He doesn't support this. He supports helping the lower-ranked players, does not support merging the women's and men's tennis tours. So right here, and also I have a great piece from Marat Safin. We'll do it next. Marat Safin and Mikhail Yuzny, who, of course, works with El Chapo, a couple of retired Russian tennis players, talk about how women's tennis without some of the big names is practically unsellable. And it's funny because I saw one article that just took just a snippet from what they said, where it just kind of redid the whole thing. It just says Safin and Yuzny think merger ATP-WTA is a good idea. Well, they said a whole lot more than that. They said it's probably a bad business move. But to me, this is the best one. You want to, here at Coffee Break Tennis, we like to talk about reality. We like to keep it real. And what's most likely going to happen is what Chris Kermode is talking about right here in Tennis World USA article. Chris Kermode on Roger Federer's proposal. If it's advantageous for both tours, it will happen. It's a big question there. Is it advantageous? And the stuff I had earlier, I guess I got rid of it. But the stuff that, what's his name, John Wertheim was saying, pretty similar stuff, so I'll save you the time on reading through that. And let's listen to what the former president of the ATP Tour, this is the guy that Djokovic ousted, if you remember the coup, the ATP presidential coup where they overthrew the president. This is him, and guy's got nothing to gain here. He's got no reason to hide anything. I think he's given us a pretty honest answer. It's going to be a lot better than what you hear from the current presidents of the WTA and the ATP, right? I think he's keeping it a little more real for us. So what did Chris Kermode say? He said, when things are going very well, and he was quoted saying this to ESPN, when things are going very well, no one wants to give up anything in any business, right? This is business 101. Another thing which I saw in the John Wertheim article, which is very true, is in business, there are no mergers. There are only acquisitions, right? When two companies come together, usually it's not that they're merging to be mutually beneficial. It's the big shark eats the smaller fish, right? Big fish eats smaller fish. It's very Mr. Goat type stuff where you prey on small animals and eat them, right? Acquisitions, not mergers. And that's basically what Chris Kermode is saying. You can't get anyone to focus on change, he says. You tend to get people focusing on different ideas and potential changes when there's a crisis, right? When you're desperate, maybe you'll see something change. In the analogy of no mergers, only acquisitions, right? The little fish is desperate and gets gobbled up. And the big fish sees an opportunity to gain and take something to make their own business bigger, right? That's how that works. So necessity drives a lot of these decisions. If it's ever advantageous for both sides to merge, it will happen. The problem with that is the ATP is much more profitable than the WTA. Until that point, it won't, says Chris Kermode. It will not happen. If one tour is doing better than the other, why do it? Of course, the ATP doing better than the WTA. Both must have an incentive to merge. It's easy to write that tennis is dysfunctional because of all those governing bodies, but it's not unusual in international sports to have that. In the end, when you're thinking of change, you always have to ask, what are the benefits? And that is the most real answer on this. What Roger Federer said is absolutely true, and I totally agree with him. It is confusing. I remember being at a tennis tournament and being confused years and years ago when I was still kind of new to tennis to see when they take the net down after a men's match and a women's match comes on, and they got to switch the sponsors, they got to switch the logos. And a lot of people out there are saying that it would be beneficial to both to sell to brands, right? You get sponsorship money for the sport. If you're selling both the ATP and the WTA packaged, that could be beneficial to the WTA mostly. Maybe not so much to the ATP players, because ultimately what would happen with that is if I'm a salesman representing tennis as a whole package, let's say we merge it, ATP, WTA, we merge it, and I'm saying, hey, look, Coca-Cola, you gotta go with us because not only are you going to reach this demographic, but we also have the WTA, we also have women's tennis side, which hits a slightly different demographic. So your product is being seen by more people, more eyeballs, and that's ultimately what's going to decide where these advertising dollars get spent, which of course fund most of the sport. The only problem is, we have the equal prize money at the Grand Slams, but at some other tennis tournaments, we don't. Like a great example is Acapulco. When you watch that exciting tournament in Mexico where Nick Kyrgios had that the win over Rafa last year, you'll look at the prize money. I think the winner there gets like $500,000 or more than that on the men's side. And on the women's side, and like Roger said, it's very confusing. In the ATP, we got Masters 1000s, we got Majors, ATP 500s, 250s. On the women's, we got all this weird stuff. Premier events, international premier. I don't even know. It's confusing, and I don't get it myself. And we have one of those lower tier tournaments in Acapulco where the winner gets like $30,000 as compared to, we're talking $500,000 to $1 million for the men's. The women's winner gets like $30,000. But of course, it looks really bad, but at the same time, it's ATP 500 for the men. For the women, it's like one of their lower tier things that's like a ATP 250 or even lower. But the bottom line here is you're going to see less money going to the men if you do this. And a lot of men, we already have this problem with guys lower rank can barely make enough money to survive on tour. A lot of them are not going to feel comfortable with that. And at the end of the day, I don't think this is going to happen anytime soon. However, it's a nice thought. Comment below what you think about that. And if you know something I don't, I would love to hear it. Last couple things here. Murat Safin says, women's tennis is practically unsellable without stars like Serena Williams. He also mentions Anna Kournikova, who was not so much known for her excellent tennis as other things. Key point. Women's tennis is less sellable because men's tennis rules in all kinds of ways. Many people don't realize that women's tennis is practically unsellable, according to Marat Safin. This is a key point. Without Sharapova, Kornikova, and Serena Williams, women's tennis is unsellable. Weighing in on the debate, former top 10 player Uzny said he agrees, saying he can't name any female players in the top 10. And to be honest with you, Uzny doesn't say exactly that. This is from ubitennis.net, written by Adam Atticott. Basically, that's what he says, but I think it's a little bit wrong, actually, because the quote I have here is Uzny saying, yes, I wouldn't be able to name the women's top 10, though I watch tennis events. I probably could tell you the names, but I won't remember the rankings. I'm the same way. I could probably list off some players that are in the top 10, but I don't know who's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right now, whereas I have the entire men's top 10 memorized. All right, finally, I got a couple things from Tennis World USA. The former fitness trainer for Novak Djokovic, he says that Djokovic will be able to play at least as long as Roger Federer into his 40s. Bad news there for Federer fans if you don't want Djokovic to break all the records. Also, we have here some more exciting stuff to me personally. Marin Cilic says Roger Federer will perfectly use the break like he has always done. I've personally seen how fascinating Roger and Rafa look on court after making a comeback. Let's recall how many injuries Nadal's had. Whenever he makes a comeback, they rarely lose to a player he isn't supposed to lose to and who isn't a rival. Roger Federer especially. Throughout his career, he's often been taking breaks of 2 months or more, always return in much better form. I don't think Federer's done. Maybe his desire will be even bigger after a 4 or 5 month break, and even more encouraging for Fed heads out there. Ivan Lubicic says, Roger is recovering, doing his rehabilitation after the surgery. For us, nothing changes. With everything the bad luck we had with this situation, the program is the same even if there was the virus. We have not talked yet about 2021. Time certainly does not stop, and he'll be 40 next year, but Roger has not hinted about a possible retirement. Lubicic also said, the governments of various countries will tell us when we're able to travel around the world again. Probably those with more experience will be able to better manage the return to the field, but in reality, we do not know when that will be. The players will likely play. The players like playing continuously, and the results in Australia, often with many surprises after a month of a stop, prove it every single year. And of course, we always see the big three come out and do well at the Australian Open. He goes on to say that it's a nice idea merging the ATP and the WTA, but you know what? It's still a very long way off. Hit the music. Last thing here. Oh, really quick. Stop the music. Take a look at this. I can't promise when I will be done with my incredible Miami Open top 10 ever matches documentary. I've probably already put 40 hours of work into watching the matches, going through old draws, looking at stats to try to decide which matches look very competitive on paper, and then watch them in their entirety. But I did uncover this. You've often heard me say the first time I ever saw a live tennis match was Djokovic winning the Miami Open in 2007. Well, the next match I saw was in 2008. And one match that I've gone through and grabbed some excellent highlight clips for you when we do this thing. And again, I'm not even going to try to say when it'll be. Maybe it'll be next year when we actually have the Miami Open again. Maybe it'll be in a week. I don't know. It's a pretty tough project. But it will be there at some point. And one thing I notice is Andy Roddick, after all the heartache and heartbreak in 2008 when he beats Roger Federer at the Miami Open in 3 sets in 2008, and then he cries tears of joy afterwards, that is definitely one of the all-time top 10 matches for me at the Miami Open. Unfortunately, the second match that I ever saw was right after that. I missed the 3-set clash of Roddick and Roger Federer, and I saw this, Davydenko, who at the time I was very upset about. I didn't realize it, but he beats Roddick in straight sets. And since I had tickets to the final, I wanted to see Roddick and Rafa Nadal play if I couldn't get Roddick and Federer. So he ruined it all for me, Davydenko. But what I didn't realize at the time was that Davydenko basically played like Roger Federer. And as I was going through that match out of curiosity, since it was the second match I ever saw in person, I was watching it. And I'm watching it and thinking to myself, like, wow, Davydenko's beating Roddick basically by playing more like Federer than Federer did himself when he lost to Roddick the day before. And take a listen to this observation from Robbie Koenig, excellent tennis commentator on Tennis TV. Take a listen to what he says. Not long after I was thinking this to myself watching this match, Robbie Koenig says this. Take a look.
Well, that's outstanding. If Federer hits that shot, you say we're watching a genius play.
Lovely team.
Now, Davydenko not quite as charismatic as the world number one. Obviously, hasn't quite won as many major tournaments, but Rarely will Federer hit a better shot than Davydenko did there. On the rise, timed it perfectly. Oh.
Well, this is sublime.
All right, hit the music. Very Federer-like, huh? And finally, this is the last thing I leave you with on today's show. We will be back next week. Not sure what day yet, but be on the lookout. We'll post it around at our at the Patreon page and on the community section of the YouTube channel. We'll post when our next show is going to be in advance, so you will know when to look for us. Finally, we have this article that Mr. Goat found. One thing that the coronavirus has shown us for sure is that there are lots of creative people out there who just needed some free time. We're seeing cat owners pass the time during the quarantine by building cardboard army tanks for their adorable cats. Some of these are incredibly detailed and show a lot of love for crafting. From boardpanda.com, Mr. Goat loved this article, and as the music plays you out, what do you mean play us out? As it plays you out, take a look at some of the highlights of these incredible cats and their incredible cardboard army tanks, of which Mr. Goat, the talking tennis cat, is very envious of. In fact, he's upstairs right now working on the blueprints for his very own cat army tank. See ya!